Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the H&E show, and we actually have some pretty cool news, and I guess you could argue rumors until it's confirmed as news to talk about today. But joining with me, I have special guest Jackson from Full Circle Cinema, and he's the editor-in-chief over there. And Jackson, I'll just let you, talk a little bit about Full Circle and what you guys do and what people can expect if they check out your guys' site.
Yeah, it's great to be back on the show. Full Circle is very similar to H&E. We covered, the latest in entertainment news, movies, TV, all that good stuff. Things have been a little slower recently, so it's been a challenge to come up with some good content to get out for everybody. But this week was definitely not that case. There's some cool stuff going on and interesting rumors and, more confirmed stories and some just stuff to talk about, which is always good.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, slow would be the best way to put it. Just like, usually we'd be talking about probably how Black Widow, based on the contents of that film, would be setting up for XYZ in the future, whether it's Thunderbolts, whether it's something in the Falcon and Winter Soldier, whatever, right? Like usually we'd be doing that and maybe getting more, not teasers, but maybe like some more promotional material for upcoming stuff like WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier. But instead we're at a really weird place where we're just kind of like, little bits and pieces come out here and there, but nothing really, I guess, definitive would be the right way to put it. So it's a weird place to be in. But we have a bunch of topics for you guys today to check out. If you guys are listening to this on an audio only platform like SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, the full audio, you guys will be able to hear the whole thing in just one go. But if you're listening to this on YouTube, before we get into the first segment, we upload this in segments. So to check out the other segments, just check out that upload or wait until the weekend after the segments are Check the weekend after the segments are posted individually, and I'll post the whole entire audio there as well so you guys can check it out. But I'll try getting most of the segments up as possible to not overload feeds. But the first segment we actually have today, I'm pretty excited for, because Jackson, I know you guys at Full Circle were posting and reporting about this, but it seems like we're getting some really cool MCU projects, Disney Plus, maybe just films, but some cool stuff coming out. I don't know if you want to kind of talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, they all came kind of fast and heavy this week. Various projects being further in development at Marvel Studios. These were all properties that were sort of rumored already, last year, the year before, things like that. People, hey, this thing may be coming. This thing, Feige and company are attempting to look into this, but it looks like actually some of these are getting concrete. The grids are coming out. People they're taking pitches for these stories. They're looking into whether to make them into a movie or show. So they're planning them into what I would assume is Phase 5.
Yeah, that's
given
what I
that
would think
Phase
too.
4 is pretty set in stone, I would say, at this point, and if the writers aren't attached and there's not directors and talent attached, that would probably have to come down the line. So I would assume these will all be down the line, even further. But yeah, these are three properties that are definitely vastly different in different corners of the MCU. But I think it's interesting for sure. I'm not trying to get my hopes up too much, just because these are in early development and these things typically aren't meant to get out. Because for whatever reason they decide not to go forward with one thing, or maybe they get a script and then end up not choosing it or not liking it. So these are all, I'm sure these are all very fluid, and that's why nothing's been confirmed by anybody. But they're fun rumors to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people I know, like comicbook.com, Brandon Davis is a huge fan of Nova, and I would like to think I'm a big fan of Nova too, even though I'd be lying if I said he was like a top 5 favorite character of mine. But I know Nova is one of the, scripts maybe, or just the projects in general that's in that kind of development stage where it's now being teased and revealed and all that stuff. And then alongside with that, we have Ghost Rider, which I'm really curious by, because I know they canceled the previously planned for Hulu Ghost Rider series that was going to have Robbie Reyes and Gabriel Luna return, which I was actually excited for. I'm not going to lie. I was rewatching.
Yeah, me too.
I was rewatching clips of Ghost Rider that they did in season 4 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And I thought, for all the faults you can point to with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. over its many seasons, Ghost Rider was one of the few things, I think, from beginning to end, they kind of did right. more or less. Like the character depiction, they didn't lighten him up unnecessarily. He was respected. He was a rather dark character. And I just think all the way around, I would have loved to have seen more of Gabriel Luna's depiction, I think. But, who knows what they're going to do. I think they should do Danny Ketch, honestly. If they're going to do an MCU Ghost Rider, I mean, Johnny Blaze, they'll probably do, but I just think Danny Ketch has a cooler design, personally, with the blue flames and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I was actually reading up on him earlier today just to see if any, recent things have happened that maybe the MCU you could argue might take inspiration from. And he's not even like a Ghost Rider anymore. He's like the spirit of corruption or something like that. And he's like bonded to a demon from Limbo. And it's like kind of crazy what's going on right now in the comics.
You love comic books, huh?
Yeah, no, I was like, what the hell is going on here? Like even before that happened, his Ghost Rider form was like red flames. It wasn't even blue flames. So it was like, I missed a lot, obviously, because I thought his whole thing was the blue flame look. While Johnny had the red flame look, and then, Robbie Reyes had his own look as well with the car. But yeah, I'm really excited for Ghost Rider. I think the other one that really caught my eye was, again, Nova, just because the last time we physically saw the Nova Corps was Guardians of the Galaxy. They've been mentioned since then, but we haven't actually seen anyone since then. So I'm really curious to see kind of how they're going to do it. Are they going to use Guardians of the Galaxy as the franchise that introduces Richard Rider or Sam Alexander, or are they going to do Captain Marvel as the franchise? Like, I'm kind of curious how they're going to go about it, just because they could do both.
Yeah, I think the origin, or his origin in general, is kind of sitting in their lap in terms of the destruction of Xandar and in turn the Nova Corps. They said it in Infinity War. We didn't see it happen because obviously it was another whole giant fight action sequence they would have had to have done and added to an already pretty long movie. But why not save it and use it in a Nova movie, a Nova show? Put that origin is as good as gold in terms of, Thanos comes down and wipes out the Nova Corps and destroys Xandar, and either Richard Rider or Sam Alexander is the last of them. That's it. There we go. And then you go from there, and he's a space ranger, and he goes off and saves the universe. It's I think there's from where you go from there, there's endless possibilities in the cosmic corner of Marvel, but where you start, I think it's pretty simple that's the way to go.
No, I agree. I mean, I'm not going to spoil too much of I have an upcoming editorial that I'm basically kind of spilling my guts over, talking about how they can introduce Nova into the MCU based on what's been established already. And one of the things I touch upon is, if you look at the MCU, I mean, the biggest thing going against Nova right now is the lack of a Nova Force like he has in the comics. And something to make him unique enough to really stand out as his own cosmic hero versus simply being like another grunt soldier that we saw in the Nova Corps that easily got wiped out by the likes of, I'm presuming, the Chitauri army and Thanos, and then also at the same time pretty much got their butt handed to them by the Kree military force led by Ronan. So the first thing I thought about obviously was the Power Stone. They had that in their custody for 4 years in canon. And if you look at what people on Earth did with just the Space Stone, I mean, I think you can really establish the creation of the Nova Force for Nova being kind of like something derived from the Power Stone's energy, just like how with the Tesseract's energy, they made tons of weapons and stuff like that throughout the MCU on Earth. I mean, they had with Marvel, obviously the Lightspeed engine that was shown in Captain Marvel, which gave her abilities, but then also at the same time, you had, I'm trying to remember like straight off the top of my head, instead of like pulling up the Word document I wrote this all at. But you also had, I think a lot of people forget this, the arc reactor technology was inspired by the Tesseract, because Howard Stark in Iron Man 2, when he was deriving that new element, he couldn't make the new element due to technology at his time. So instead, he designed the arc reactor to basically be an alternative pseudo-replicant energy similar to the Tesseract. And then Tony Stark perfects that into the miniaturized version, which basically powers the Iron Man armors. So I think you can, if you're basing your logic off something like that roadmap, you can argue that from studying with much more advanced technology, from studying the Power Stone, you can make a similar kind of power source that becomes the MCU version of the Nova Force.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people want to move on from the quote unquote Infinity Saga, but I think there's still room to pull from it. And the stones, using the stones for those kind of ideas, was never really an issue that people had.
Yeah,
The Tesseract being important in Captain Marvel and Captain America, and had an influence in Iron Man. It wasn't an issue. It was just part of the plot they used. But it was it's important to pull from the past, and I think with a character like Nova, it's important to make him stand out, like you said. And I think giving him, this tragic origin where, either he's the entire Nova Corps is wiped out, him and a small group survive, or him by himself survive, whatever the case is, that it makes it all that more interesting. You're already connected to him. You already feel that, oh, this is something that I already know. This was an event I know took place and that was tragic, and,
exactly.
it affected the Guardians and it affected a lot of people because, they went and saved the planet. It's just something to pull from, and I think we'll see. Black Widow's the first movie of Phase 4, and she's dead in current events. So you have to pull from the past to move into the future, and I think that's one way of doing it.
Well, what do you think also about the fact that they could do Richard Rider, being older, or they can make Richard Rider more of a teenager like he was in his original introduction to the comics from Roman Day, who luckily for the MCU has already appeared, played by John C. Reilly. So I guess he could come back again, but. Like, what would you, in your opinion, which route do you think they'll go with? Because obviously, on one hand, Marvel's trying to go, introduce some more diversity with their characters, like Miss America is rumored, Miss Marvel. So that kind of perfectly would lean more towards Sam Alexander's take of the character. But at the same time, you have Richard Rider's take, which probably fits more with what's already been established if you're going to do an origin story, I'd say. So, like how, I mean, they can't merge them together, like there's no way they could do a proper amalgamation, I don't think. So like what do you think? I think a buddy cop would work, but
I don't necessarily think you need the two. I think there's enough on one or the other. If I had to make the decision, I would probably skew younger, and if that was Sam Alexander, that would be the case. I know the Champions is a popular comic group right now with Miss Marvel and Miles Morales and Sam Alexander. So I think that having a younger core, because we have all the older heroes, we have the established heroes that but these younger audiences need people to connect to, and Spider-Man is there and Miss Marvel is coming, but it's important to keep youth and keep these actors in here for a while and keep them making movies when they're popular, because some people can only go for so long and some people get older, and
that's true.
It's just the case, but locking down for a franchise. And I think Nova is a character that could potentially be a franchise. He's not the most well-known character right now to the general public, but it's a character that has a lot of history in Marvel, and people will learn to love. So I think it's definitely a conundrum. That may just be, they may want to see which writers they attach, which pitch they take, depending on which version. Maybe two different characters. It's unclear which character they've chosen. No one has reported on that specifically, but I think there's room for both. But I think they should. I would skew younger from the start.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do high school. I'd probably do like college. But I do Richard Rider personally, just because you can already do the whole Xandar destroyed, Roman Day goes to Earth, that whole kind of origin story. And I just feel with Sam Alexander, I do like the character, actually. That was one of the few bright parts of Jeff Loeb, I thought, in terms of his more recent contributions to Marvel. And for those who don't know, it was inspired by his son, I believe, who ended up dying. So it's definitely, for Jeff Loeb, it was a very sensitive character. And you could definitely tell that level of care in terms of like how the character was written and really delivered to Marvel Comics. One of the few recent, I would say, superhero editions that felt really fresh in a lot of respects. But definitely, yeah, I think Nova has definitely probably more potential than, actually, scratch that. Probably him and Ghost Rider have the most potential out of the reported characters being developed for MCU editions. They could both be main staples for a long time. And besides them and, besides Ghost Rider and Nova, the two that was really interesting to me, the first one was Ironheart, I gotta say, because she is such a new character. I think she's been around for like 4 years. So the fact that in 4 years time span, similar to how Miles Morales got his animated movie, it's just kind of like nuts how quickly they're moving with some ideas. And then also Secret Warriors, which is interesting because between Ironheart and Secret Warriors, both made by Brian Michael Bendis, and then also it looks like the MCU is skewing into the Dark Reign storyline, written by Brian Michael Bendis. We're getting a lot of Bendis going on here. I don't know if people are realizing that. Like,
yeah, I mean, he was very, very popular in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, into the 2010s. He was on top of his game. He was one of the bigger writers out there, and I think his stories were prominent and they were important. I mean, I love Dark Reign. Ironheart is definitely a newer character.
yeah.
But the premise of the character is so flush with ideas and things that you can pull from and directions you can go. It just opens up an entire world where it's like, well, and also she doesn't have this deep comic history that people would be upset if you change this or you change that or you move this or that way. She's not set in stone. So it's kind of this thing that they can maneuver around and play with a little bit, which is something that the MCU does very well.
Yeah, I mean, Jackson, what do you think about this? So just like with Nova, I had written, I think this comes out in like a week, so I'm not going to try spoiling too much. But I wrote a whole thing about how, just like with the Nova thing, how they could basically, based on what's been established already in the MCU, do Ironheart. And I was actually surprised by how much has been established for the most part. I mean, you have the whole, the character in the comics went to MIT where she built her first Iron Man-like armor. In Civil War, they established the whole Stark scholarship thing for MIT students to fund their inventions. I mean, at the same time, the MCU has a habit of doing amalgamations of characters. I don't know if they'll do it for Ironheart, but in Marvel Comics, War Machine had a niece that was also like a genius, basically, of mechanical engineering and computer science and programming, tutored by Tony Stark for a while. So I'm curious to see if they might do an amalgamation, because you even touched on it. Ironheart's a really new character, not too much, I guess you would say, core lore to the character that people would be super upset at if they changed. So I would be not surprised if they somehow changed it so Riri Williams is an amalgamation of the comics version plus Lila Rhodes and make her the niece of War Machine. And then maybe Don Cheadle somehow can appear in that Disney Plus series and kind of be
any reason to keep him around.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing that's really kind of always been on my mind with Don Cheadle's portrayal of War Machine is the fact that they tease so much with him, like missions he's been on and things he's done, and he's super like confident, right? He's constantly poking fun at Tony as if he's like, I basically pilot the armor better than you do and you made it. But they never really show us, that like they give us little clips here and there of him in the armor, but never full adventures. And I know they were going to try doing that solo film at one point and it kind of fell through. But I think this would be really cool to kind of see Don Cheadle's War Machine post Endgame really kind of stepping up in that kind of role in terms of being basically the only Iron Man left, especially because he has the military connection as well. So, definitely I can see him really being, I guess, like, taking it really seriously and serving his country still as War Machine, maybe as Iron Patriot again, because the Endgame armor was basically Iron Patriot 2.0. But I'd be really curious to see what they could maybe do with the character, connect it. I mean, I think fans would like it because basically Rhodey's the only other character besides Pepper and Happy that could possibly give a blessing to be like an Iron Man type character. And he would be a clear way that Riri Williams could get access and tools to a more, I guess, advanced kind of armor, so to speak, instead of whatever hodgepodge armor she builds on her first go. So I think it makes sense to some extent there, just like how Spider-Man Far From Home needed the Stark tech to make his final suit. But yeah, I guess we'll see what they'll do. I mean, they're doing Secret Warriors as well, which I know is kind of an interesting one, because didn't Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. do that already?
Yeah, they already had a version of the team on there with Quake and Yo-Yo. So I find it hard to believe that they would do a sequel show. I know they're planning to develop some shows for MCU-based shows on ABC.
I want
it. It's hard for me to believe that they would do that.
More Chloe Bennett is never a bad thing.
No, and she got so much better as that show went on. I fell off of it a couple years ago, but And I watched up through season 5, I believe, and she got so much better. And the show it found its audience, and it wasn't for me at the time, but I'm sure I'll go around and revisit it at some point, because the first few seasons were some good stuff, and the way it connected to the MCU was it was something that I really enjoyed. So I mean, we'll have to wait and see. I think but just because that they axed the Ghost Rider show, and Hellstrom's going to be a limited series now after they planned that whole thing. I think that it's very clear that they're moving past the Jeff Loeb era of TV.
I agree.
All that stuff, and I think leaving that thread is just something I don't know if I can see Feige doing.
Yeah, and I mean, and just to close this segment out before we get to the next one, I think one of the cleverest things Marvel TV did was basically with the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. universe, they said it was a separate timeline. So, like, basically, it was a parallel timeline to the main MCU universe, just like how in Endgame they went to all those different parallel timelines, like the Battle of New York and all that stuff. So I think that was really clever that they did that, because it allows it to be canon to the MCU multiverse, but it's not, the same timeline literally as what the movies are in. So it kind of lets them, if they want, you could argue, pick and choose from the TV shows what things maybe are relevant to carry over, whether it's characters and stuff like that, actresses, actors, without needing to take the whole thing. And then also that kind of helps with the whole Inhuman stuff that they did on the TV show, but never once referenced in the movies. But yeah, I think it's really cool. I mean, we'll see what happens. We'll see what actually comes to fruition and what kind of falls through the cracks, I guess. Thanks for those who are still listening to the entire audio, if that's what you guys did. And for those on YouTube, thanks for sticking out through the entire video segment. Let me know down below, what is your favorite kind of thing we talked about? What is something you wish we expanded more upon? Any feedback as you guys can give. And then last but not least, Jackson, for those still listening, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at JacksonHayes67. You can follow Full Circle at Full Circle Cine. We're currently taking applications for writers, so if anybody's interested, you can find it on the site. Just a little plug, but yeah, find us there.
Yeah, and then also at the same time, if you like this podcast, subscribe and check it out. It's going to be publishing-wise, every Tuesday and Thursday. So check it out then. And then also at the same time, let me know in the comments below if you're listening to on YouTube, when you're listening to the full audio version, what platform you're using. Because I'm just really curious, who's using SoundCloud versus Spotify versus Apple Podcasts versus Google Podcasts. I'm just really curious to see where the kind of distributions of full audio listens are. But with that being said, I hope everyone has a great day listening to this, and we'll check you guys later.